Sent from Disneyland, history in our hand. So much to say about yesterday and the decades we have spanned. Postcards from the park, this journey will embark. See what has changed and what remains on Sent from Disneyland. Sent from Disneyland.
Welcome to the Sent from Disneyland podcast.
Here age relives fond memories of the past.
If it's your first time joining us, welcome. On this podcast, we'll take a journey into the past and explore Disneyland, Disneyland history, and more, with mementos, snapshots, souvenirs, and postcards sent from Disneyland, from 1955 to the present. Let's start by thanking my patrons from Patreon.com. You can join in at any level to support the show and receive snail mail from my trips to Disneyland and from my desk, plus some sneak peeks and bonus content. Special thanks to Random Olive, the first patron to this podcast, and to the rest of the e-ticket patrons, Tania, Eric Daniels, Monica Seitz Vega, Scott Cagle, Russ Romano, Michael and Christina Cross, and Sheila Harry. C-ticket patrons Serious Inquiries Only, Debbie Weinstein, Jennifer Schneep, Angela Reynolds, Grace Coate, Patty Wolin, and Ben and Noel Bruning. B-ticket patron Joshua Bell, and to the A-ticket patrons Elise Sharp, Zealot Infinity, Alexis Robles, Angel DeBlock, and the Beyond the Railroad podcast. I am your host, your post-host Clocky, and today we have 2 postcards sent from Disneyland. The front of our first postcard has an aerial view of Fantasyland. You can see the teacups and King Arthur's Carousel in the center, and on the right you can see Fantasyland Theater and Snow White's Scary Adventure, and if you look closely you can see the old gazebo near where Princess Fantasy Fair is today, and the top of the Chicken of the Sea pirate ship. On the back it reads, Mad Tea Party. The Mad Hatter's Tea Party is a ride in the teacup and saucer from the Alice in Wonderland story. It's a thrill to thousands on their visit to Fantasyland. It's postmarked September 6, 1956, with a Balboa Island, Newport Beach, California Golden Anniversary 1906-1956 cancel and a 2-cent red Jefferson postage stamp, Scott number 1033. I assume they visited the park on Wednesday, September 5th, 1956, the same day the Fort Wilderness Snack Bar opened, when park hours were from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. The weather was a high of 82 and a low of 57. Park attendance that day was 19,680. It's addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Harvey R. Timmons of Upper Darley, Pennsylvania. It reads, Hi Harv, having a wonderful, terrific, fabulous, marvelous, passionate time. Miss you though, love you, and wish you were here. Take care of Woo Woo, Pete, and Stevie, and yourself. Love, Patsy. One of the new postcards in the postcard pack at the park is of the Sword in the Stone in Fantasyland. This postcard's aerial view of the original Fantasyland has the carousel directly where the Sword in the Stone is today. Once New Fantasyland opened, it pushed back the carousel and added this new addition to the landscape. In 1983, when New Fantasyland opened, it included a special show with Merlin from the movie Sword in the Stone. I found a few YouTube videos of the show from 1987, 1992, and 2003. The show's purpose remained the same throughout the different versions. Merlin is sent to Fantasyland because King Arthur has that day off, and they need a king or queen for the day, or afternoon, or part of the afternoon. The earlier versions include a group of musicians following along. After much fanfare, Merlin would use the sphere of knowledge to find a tall, strong guest to pull the sword from the stone and to be Arthur's temporary replacement. The first guest, an adult from the crowd, would be introduced and would attempt to pull the sword. This guest would be unable to pull the sword from the stone, and Merlin would search the crowd for a kid, introduce him or her, and after an initial failed attempt, Merlin would cast a spell to clear the mind and fill it with brave and truthful thoughts. A band would also mention that only Arthur could pull the sword from the stone, and Merlin would reply, maybe with the spell, the kid could just slightly budge it out of the stone. The magic would work, and Merlin would crown the king or queen. Earlier versions include a cape and a scepter, which would be relinquished after some photos were taken. In the 1992 version, you can also see a cast member coming up to take a Polaroid photo of the newly crowned king or queen. In the 1987 version, Merlin gave the new royalty a button, and later versions there was a medal on a ribbon and a royal proclamation where Merlin would fill in the name and sign it. I took a quick look on eBay and found that These items were priced at about $150 to $500 for the medal. The circular medal's face had an image of Merlin with a book next to Arthur pulling the sword from the stone. The obverse has a simplified version of Sleeping Beauty Castle over Disneyland written in the classic Gothic font, and the happiest place on earth written around the edge of the circle. Add some flair to your mail by checking out stamps at Enfield Post. You can explore different stamp options on our Etsy site, grab some great deals by following EP Sunday Sales on Instagram, or create something special and have her design a stamp array for your invitation or celebration. You can head over to enfieldpost.com and explore all the different vintage postage stamps you can use on your next card or letter. That's ENFIELDPOST on Instagram and enfieldpost.com for your wedding and vintage postage needs. Enfield Post is the official postage stamp sponsor of the Sent from Disneyland podcast. The front of our next postcard has the entrance to Peter Pan's flight. Behind it, you can see the Matterhorn. On the back it reads, "A land where dreams come true." Fantasyland is the Magic Kingdom's most magical place. Here, within the quaint settings of a Bavarian village, guests find storybook characters to delight and amuse. It's postmarked April 30th, 1990, with an Anaheim cancel and a 25-cent owl postage stamp, Scott number 2285. I assume they visit the park on Friday, April 27th, 1990, and Saturday, April 28th, 1990, when park hours were from 9 a.m. to midnight on Friday and 8 a.m. to midnight on Saturday. The weather was a high of 75 and a low of 58 on Friday, and a high of 74 and a low of 60 on Saturday. It's addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Don DeVault of Bellevue, Ohio. It reads, 4/28/90. Hi, having a great time. Robert is 9 months today. He has been so good, and so has the girls. We went to Disneyland yesterday and today, and are going back tonight. See you soon. Love, Lloyd and Thelma. Looking at this postcard, you can see the window used as a stage management booth for the show. This allowed a view of the sword, and there were colored lights to let Merlin know when everything was ready for the kid to budge the sword from the stone. While looking through my maps and park schedules, I found a 1986 schedule that lists 3 showtimes for the show, and no performances on Thursdays or Fridays. By 1988, there's a list of all the days of the week, with 4 performances a day, but different bands. Monday through Wednesday, the Make Believe Brass Band, and Thursday through Sunday, the Fantasyland Brass. Looking at the 1987 video, the Make Believe Brass Band had costumes similar to the Pearly Band, and was a 4-person band with percussion and 3 brass instruments. The 1992 video has a larger band, 5 brass instruments, and they're all wearing medieval tunics and costume pieces. Looking at the 1996 schedule, there were 6 performances of the ceremony every day. In 2003, there was no band, and all the sound effects came magically through the speakers around the area. Another change in the 2003 version was the use of a divining rod to find the temporary ruler of the realm. This replaced the sphere of knowledge, or the ball that knows it all, from the previous versions. As far as I can tell, the show was put on hiatus in the mid to late 2000s and has not returned to being a regularly performed show at Disneyland. Other Disney parks, including the Magic Kingdom in Florida and Disneyland Paris, have also had this show. The front of my incoming postcard is sponsored by the Art Throwdown. Art Throwdown, or ATD, is a craft hour on Instagram, starting at 9 p.m. Eastern or 6 Pacific. Art Throwdown is a wonderful community of artists who love to share their craft, from creating sticker postcards and coloring techniques to intricate paper cutting and unique crafting. It's always a treat to watch a show and occasionally get some one-of-a-kind postcards from the group. Each host brings something a little different to each show. I'll list some of the regular hosts, or you can follow Russ Romano 2021 on Instagram. The front of my incoming postcard has a view of Hanauma Bay in Hawaii. The bay is almost entirely enclosed with a small break leading into the ocean. You can see people on the beach and in the water. On the back it reads, Hanauma Bay, Hawaii. Hanauma Bay was formed when the volcanic crater Koko Head collapsed into the ocean. As the crater collapsed, water rushed in and eventually became separated from the rest of the ocean by a coral reef. This isolation has provided a perfect habitat for marine life to thrive in. It's postmarked August 30th, 2024, with a Honolulu, Hawaii cancel and a Puppy Love Forever postage stamp, Scott number 5746. It reads, 8/29/2024, aloha from Hanauma Bay, and some great snorkeling. We saw a lot of tropical fish here, including Hawaii's state fish. The trip has been great so far. Angela. P.S. This was mailed from the cool 1901 mailbox at the Moana Surf Rider. Thank you so much for the postcard, Angela. I had to look up how to pronounce Hanauma Bay, and learned that you have to get a reservation to enjoy the beach and snorkeling as it is protected, and they limit the number of people who can go per day. I'm glad you got a reservation and that you were able to enjoy it. I also love the mailbox you sent this postcard from. I always keep an eye out for letterboxes at older hotels, as they can be quite ornate, and I enjoy them even more when they're functional. Thanks for listening to Sent from Disneyland. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and tell your friends. It would also help to leave a 5-star rating and comment on whatever podcast platform you use. If you'd like to support the show financially, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/sentfromdisneyland. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Sent from Disneyland, or my website, sentfromdisneyland.com. For questions and comments, send me a postcard addressed to Sent from Disneyland, P.O. Box 44, Hood, California, 95639. This podcast is not affiliated with Disney, the United States Postal Service, or any post office or Disney-related properties. Opinions expressed on this podcast belong to the host and guests of the Sent from Disneyland podcast. This podcast is produced and edited by Clocky McDowell, website designed by Misty McDowell, theme song was written and performed by Noah Sunday Lefkowitz. Take it away, Noah.